Welcome to TERRA's third Thursday video podcast for the month of February 2026. Today, we will be having another strategic discussion designed to help your organization maximize your e-scrap and ITAD operations. I am your host, Stephen Napoli, President of TERRA, the Electronics Reuse and Recycling Alliance. For our regular consumers of these sessions, you know that we strive to be brief and to the point while providing you with useful information to enhance your knowledge, operations, and your bottom line. But quickly before we get started, we need to acknowledge our new and renewing members since our last session. These include Relectro, Secure Enterprise Asset Management, SEAM, and Environmental Office Solutions, EOS, all three of which are founding members, as well as Green Tech, C&I Electronics Recycling, Secure E-Waste Management, SEM, Cyclic Materials, Zippy Race, and our newest members, the Mobility Marketplace. In today's session, I'm talking with Spencer Lawrence, Logistics Manager with Integrity Express Logistics, IEL. Join us as we discuss the trucking market reset, what e-waste shippers need to know, which includes the reasons behind recent increases in tender rejection rates, as well as the tightening of trucking capacity due to new regulations and market conditions. I hope you enjoy. Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of TERRA's Third Thursday podcast. This is the month of February 2026. Hard to believe. We're already starting the second month of a new year. And we're going to be talking about a subject that has been on my mind for a long time, and that is logistics, something that's very obviously important to you on your day-to-day operations. And we've got a real expert here to talk to us today, Spencer Lawrence. So I'm going to have him quickly introduce himself, his company, and then we're going to get right into it, talking about the trucking market and how it's going to impact your business. So Spencer, take it away.
Thank you, Steve. I do appreciate the warm welcome. My name is Spencer Lawrence, and I am a key account executive over at Integrity Express Logistics. I actually just met Steve back in October at one of the e-waste conventions in Texas, which was kind of in the backyard. So it was great that I'd already been working with so many e-waste companies and meeting Steve there. He had mentioned the opportunity about joining, and we've had some things come up, and I called him and let him know, and he was happy to make time in his schedule, and I was happy to make time in mine. So I'm originally from Texas, but moved to Florida and just recently moved back to Frisco, Texas. And I think one of the big things that I am known for is my transparency and integrity. And one of the reasons I really wanted to come on your show was to focus on a couple of key topics that are actually quite difficult to talk about with customers, especially to get them understand actually what's happening in the marketplace. So thanks again for having me on, and I hope I can give some good information to your viewers and listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a wild ride in logistics for the last several years, from COVID till today, and what we're dealing with the supply chain issues and tariffs and all the things that are kind of going on. Kind of give a little bit of a brief history of kind of where we've been over the last couple of years and kind of where we are, and then we'll kind of get into, where we're going. What do you see in the future, that sort of thing.
Sure. I think the best place to start really is COVID, and that's where the real fluctuation and changes in our marketplace develop due to policy and people not being able to go and actually buy their goods. So what that did was that created an open market, especially for outside international operations that invested into carrier networks. And it created just a lot of drivers out on the road. And it's then started to die off, which we all couldn't live off not going to work for so long. The government paycheck at the time, I don't even remember them, but it wasn't enough. A lot of people had PPE loans and got into the trucking market as an opportunity. But once the country actually opened back up, you saw a lot of those carriers falling out, especially over the next few years. You saw rates drop So people, they were the carriers were kind of at a eating at each other kind of phase, and now there's about 30% less of the workforce on the road than when we had during the time of COVID. So you're seeing a little bit more constraints on capacity, especially now that new policy is in place that came into place over the past year. And it's those changes that have really, really affected the market. I'm sure a lot
Mhm.
of customers will think it's just that time of year that we see the rate increases, but normally we see a little bit of relief at the pump, and we're just not seeing it. And there's a few factors that kind of have led us to that.
So, I'm remembering back, when the pandemic first started, there was this massive, like you said, influx in logistics, and logistics prices went through the roof, even though there was it seemed like a larger capacity, to pay for a truck. I mean, I remember Walmart advertising, truckers for $100,000 a year positions and those sort of things, and the prices went crazy.
Sure.
Um, Now it's been kind of in this wild fluctuation over the last couple of years. How has that impacted? I'm wondering because obviously with Terra, we're a network, we're 130 facilities in 11 countries. Do you see, from your end on the logistics side, do you see like some of your logistics partners or some of your recycling partners, are they trying to work with other recyclers to try to shrink that logistics footprint to try to maximize some revenues, or what do you see happening in that realm of kind of forcing companies to work together a little bit closely because logistics is a little bit more of a question mark?
Well, I think really it just depends on how the company does their freight operations. I have, I've reached out to well over 500 different e-waste companies out of the 1,200 that were, on the website
Siri.
that you can go to for Siri. And the painstaking process is trying to find exactly which ones do which thing, right? And then trying to get a hold of somebody, that was a whole nother endeavor. So I think one of the big things is trust in y'all's industry. And, whether y'all play nice with each other doesn't really come down on a freight side. I think really with any business, it just gets really cutthroat from there. And you have to kind of just roll with the punches. Um, you know, I'm seeing we as an industry are seeing a much higher tender rejection rate. So that means if a recycle company was using asset-based carriers or broker contracts that were locked into rates, well, those brokers or assets maybe thought they could survive, getting through to March, April, and getting through December, January, February. But I don't know if they anticipated all the changes and then the ruling that just came out recently, which is going to continuously affect the market.
So yeah, so dive into that a little bit more. Kind of what are some of the changes that people are experiencing right now?
Sure. So one of the biggest crackdowns that we noticed last year was the English speaking and writing tests
Yes.
that started in the kind of center middle of the country, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas. And that's when we first started to see capacity issues, especially in flatbed markets. Kind of when I say capacity is, if we're doing a load to truck ratio, a normal tight capacity, tight but no problem still is between 7 and 10 loads per truck. But now we're seeing capacity reaching like 27 loads per truck, which is an extremely high number. So if you're talking about 10,000 loads in a small geographical region and only
Hmm.
500 trucks to service those loads, what does that do? That creates a carrier's market where they're getting to pick and choose the loads they want. And a month ago, 2 weeks ago, even the prices have gone up on certain lanes simply because the capacity just isn't there. And
Hmm.
so I think what we're seeing is a combination of foreign investors into carrier and logistical operations are hesitant to enter the markets because of the requirements that they're going to have to keep these non-domicile CDL permits.
Hmm.
So
And
after
they've
the
been through
rule,
this
yeah,
4 or 5 years ago with COVID when there was a big explosion and people got burned.
that's correct. So there, when they start doing those highway checks, when a carrier goes and pulls over to a station and then they do the other checks, what they're really looking for is like falsified logs and information and just making sure that the load is secure. That was a lot of the violations, a lot of really just slap on the wrist. But they're what they're making it is to where, for let's just say illegal workers that came and got a job here and they got a work permit, they're able to stay longer with a CDL work permit versus a normal green card working permit. So you saw a little bit of exploitation in the system, especially post COVID, when it really opened up to a little bit more of, we'll just say, shady play. And I'm sure that you've heard some stories even on the e-waste side, especially being in international markets. Maybe you're supposed to be buying grade A board and you get grade C board, right?
Hmm.
But you've already paid the piper, and all of a sudden you can't hear from them anymore, right? So we have seen the uptick in fraud and theft after post COVID because you had a lot of, let's say, questionable players enter a growing market, and they saw a place to capitalize not only in profit but potentially have nefarious issues going on. So we've seen an uptick in theft and fraud and double brokering, and then we're seeing uh, an extremely tight capacity developing, and we're seeing low inventories and warehouses at an all-time low because they're just not ordering product. So that's going to lead to our next problem.
Which is,
Well, at some point in time, you got to restock the shelf,
yep.
and it doesn't matter how much it costs for it to get there. The product has to move and has to get on the shelf. You can't, you as a big part of the supply chain, if you were just hoping and waiting for rates to come down enough to where it wasn't going to be, more than $250,000 hit on a super large scale, you're it's going to be wishful thinking because of the policy in place, the ruling that just came, and how that's going to keep on reducing the amount of drivers we have on the road, thereby creating pressure on those rates, and it's going to keep them at a higher than normal rate. We may see them come down like for seasonally, especially
Hmm.
when produce season opens up. But for the most part, you're going to see capacity issues continue.
Yeah, I mean it's the old supply and demand. If demand is high and supply and capacity is low, prices are going to shoot up. So, what are, some of the strategies that, you're kind of working with your clients to think about to, mitigate some of these issues that are coming down the pipe?
So, for upcoming projects and lanes for my customers, I meet well in advance. I know there's only so much we can do, especially in the e-waste community, because a lot of that is done by bid and could be, less than a 72-hour process to move a load from point A to B. And a lot of times it can be less than 48 and less than 24 hours. So being able to rely on my carrier relations and our company's carrier relations is going to be a big factor. What does that mean, really? Well, for a while since COVID, especially when rates and carriers started cannibalizing each other, how you treated those carriers, it was very, very important to develop those relationships.
Mhm.
And it's been easy for a long time to just say, okay, well, I don't want to work with you because your rate to move my product is too high. Those same brokers are going to those carriers and going, hey man, I need you to throw me a bone. I need a break. My customers are struggling. I'm struggling. What can you do for a rate? And they're going, oh, you're that broker that said that you didn't want to work with us before and you didn't treat me very well. Well, good luck. I'm going to move somebody else's freight. So I've made a point to really invest into my carrier relations and how I treat people. I think more than anything, and when you're in sales, relationships are everything. And I've sold just about everything in different markets. And e-waste and logistics are just another piece of my overall pie. I'm passionate about e-waste because I'm a fisherman from Florida, and I've seen horrendous acts of people, just not
Not doing right.
treating our waterways, our beaches, and things that we hold dear, where we live, where you vacation.
It's
Um,
unfortunate that here in the South there is a lot of that.
it's tough. So, you know, I when I started divulging into the e-waste community, because it was so different than, reefer markets, lumber markets, steel markets. It was so unique and so niche, that I saw an opportunity, especially to be a helpful part of the process, to be a part of the supply chain that actually moves that product and takes it to the proper downstream chain of
Mhm.
custody, right? So
And you guys
that's
play
where I
such an important role because, I mean, oftentimes material's not even darkening the door of the organization that has acquired it, right? You guys
sure.
are taking it from the source to the downstream, and the person that got the contract to go get it might never receive it. So, I mean, you guys play such an important role of making sure that, yeah, material gets to the right downstreams, the material is handled properly along the
Mhm.
way. Just part of that continuity of trust that, certification kind of requires. You guys have to play a very vital role in that. You are really strong. Well, some of the strongest partners that, our certified East ITAD and East Scrap providers are going to have.
Well, I think at the end of the day, you have to, if you're going to be at the top, you have to understand what's going on at the sub level. And I remember getting into logistics. I would tell my friends when I told them I was getting this job a long time ago, um, that at least I'm going to figure out the way the world works and how it moves from point A to point B. And what we're seeing is about 6 months of aftermath effects. So when
Mhm.
things start to go in place, let's just say the tariffs, for example, hit in July of last year. This ruling came in December, late December of this year. And then all this data came out in January to give us, hey, this is what's happening.
Mhm.
And are you going communication is so important. I think that's really the moral of this story, and how you communicate that, because I'm sure there's a lot of companies that are scrambling on loads they thought they had covered for a price, but now those prices have gone up and they're trying to find any broker that can find a truck anywhere near them that will pick up their load, because it's got to get out of there yesterday or
Mhm.
today or the next day. It doesn't matter. It's just, it doesn't stop. So that's really what it boils down to, is just understanding that, you know, are you going to be the broker that says, well, let's just hope it gets better? Or, hey, I'm going to go and figure out why things are the way they are. And I'm going to get back to you with some concrete information. So I'm not just blowing smoke up you, telling you that, hey, it's going to get better, when really we start moving into produce season. It doesn't matter that it's going to get warmer out. There's still going to be that surge of product buying that's been
Mhm.
held off by however many companies, that's going to they have to fill their warehouses and inventory, and that's going to create this secondary capacity surge. And I'm telling you that 27 to 1 number could potentially go to 35 plus in some areas,
Yeah.
which that's devastating, for
That
companies.
impacts everything. And that's, that and so many of our ITAD ITAD providers that are out there, doing remarketing and rev shares with clients. If back end logistics fees start going through the roof and those profit margins start to shrink, they want to have a reasonable discussion with their customers in advance, as to say, look, this is what's coming.
That's right.
Expect that, you know, the good times are going to roll, but back end costs are getting higher on logistics. Just that's, that's outside of our control. But, to educate your clients as to what's going to happen. I mean, that
Well,
being.
because well here and Steve, here's what I'm telling you what's happening is let's just say, you have your quarterly meeting. You're working on day to day, and then you have your quarterly meeting for a reason because when you have upper level management making decisions, you can't just be there every single week to hover around your team to make sure that costs are in line. So you may not most freight companies, they're net 30. Most businesses are net 30. So you're not
Mhm.
seeing the real costs until 30 days later. But if you're waiting till next quarter and you're about to review what just happened this quarter, and what happened in November, December, January, and you're like, okay, well, maybe it'll go down February, March. No, it's probably going to just ticker down just a little bit, but we've reached a new plateau where until we get more carriers that American based carriers, there's going to be this ripple effect for 6 months from now and six
Right.
months from now, because those inventory levels have to come up, those raw materials have to, the consumers have to buy that put together product at some point. You can't just spend millions and billions of dollars on marketing telling you that, hey, we've got this 2026 version
Hmm.
and we can't even get it to you, right?
Right.
Because we didn't take into consideration what was happening from a policy perspective that's putting a stop to, and this is it's a good thing because we're putting a stop to companies that are taking advantage of the system, that those same companies that are slowly getting pushed out because they can't afford to be bad anymore. They pushed out the people that were doing it right, that were
Hmm.
paying and keeping their equipment up to date, right? But they couldn't compete at the rates that the other carriers were willing to go down to. So
Right.
eventually that's going to hurt the company, and it's going to hurt the entire supply chain, and we're really seeing effects of that now.
So yeah, I mean, sometimes the remedy is, does cause pain. Um, so there was an issue, it's being addressed, but that's still just recent. Is there new medicine? Is there a new bandage? Is there a new program or thought or policy change coming up that you can see that might have a positive impact on kind of normalizing the supply and demand?
Well, so basically, what the ruling did was there's about 200,000 drivers right now that have non-domicile CDLs that are going to expire within the next 4 years. 200,000. We have an expectation to replace about 6 to 10,000 per year. That's not even a quarter of the amount that we're losing.
Yeah.
So we're losing a much
So potentially this
another
is a
part of our.
long-term problem, structural
This is
problem.
so. Here's the big question. Okay, Spencer, what does all this mean? Have we seen the worst of it yet? I hate to preach doom and gloom because that's not something I do. I'm a super positive person, but this is the reality, and people need to really take notice. We're not even at the top of this yet. So,
What
whereas
about
you may,
future tech? I mean,
excuse
does
me.
future tech is are our self-driving Tesla cars and Tesla trucks and robo
Well, but here,
taxis, all
here
that we're
here's
going
the
to
thing. All,
provide
all
some?
that sounds all that sounds really expensive,
Yeah.
right? So everything comes with a cost. And if you're an asset-based carrier, let's just throw out Averett, for example, you have to hire new drivers at X amount of dollars so that they can pay their bills, right? So
Hmm.
those costs are, because there's a new standard, because we can't get away with hiring cheaper labor the way we used to. We have to now build that into our framework, and that has to that has to go up to the top like immediately for every single business, or else it's going to come back and bite them. They're going to be the ones that are hoping that their asset-based carriers and their logistics brokers can keep giving them the rates that were of yesteryear. And the problem is it's kind of like they don't even exist anymore, and we're at that new norm, kind of like the way the way fuel prices, every 10 years something happens and then it's kind of a new norm. Like I remember when, living in South Florida for so long, we have hurricane issues that we have to deal with. But there was a time where we were like, gosh, gas is over $3 a gallon. Can any of us survive? But
Hmm.
it then has now become kind of the normal. Now, obviously, gas prices have come down, and it's not like, for the trucking example, diesel prices have come down. That's not the issue. That's not the issue at all. The issue is there's on one block there's 10 loads that have to go out, and they're all fighting over two trucks.
Yeah.
I mean, those trucks now get to sit back and go, well, you guys take 3 hours to load. You guys only take an hour to load, and your delivery appointment is at 9 in the morning versus 5 p.m. Now, what do you do as a trucker? You know what I mean? You're going to want to be as most advantageous to be able to take care of your days and get reloaded. So you get to pick and choose whichever load you want versus the way things used to be for the past few years, where we had the advantage. The customer and the broker had the advantage over the carrier. We have moved in over the last couple of months where the carriers have the advantage, and I compare it to the real estate market in Florida in like 2019, 2020, when COVID hit. There was a surge in
Hmm.
people moving down to Florida, and if you had to get a loan, you didn't even get a shot. They were taking the first to third offer, and it was a cash offer, and it was 15, 20,000 over asking price, no questions. And that was the way it was. Us living there and being in real estate at the time, I was just like, what's happening here?
Right.
You can't even go and see a house before it's gone off the market, and being the third person. So you have to be aggressive if you want to move your freight, which means you're going to have to pay more. Now, for a while we've been trying to figure out, okay, where does this thing end? And we haven't seen it yet, right? So we just kind of have to have a trust system and communicate what's going on, and understand that, hey, my job is to find you a truck. It's my relationships that we're taking advantage of to get you those trucks in those areas for not as much as other people are paying. That's the name of the game. We're never ever going to pay the most for this truck unless
Hmm.
extenuating circumstances arise, but it's not going to be what it used to be, because, I have to make money too, right?
Right.
And your product has to move, and there's a new cost to for that whole circle to keep going, because the system was slashed last year basically, and now we're in like this kind of new age where we haven't really figured it out, um and we're just kind of playing it week to week. So I've
Do
seen
you expect?
some relief in some lanes, but other lanes they just keep going up.
Yeah. Do you expect with, this kind of change in the marketplace, these rises in costs, that, some of our ITAD and e-waste, partners here are going to try to in-house these services? I mean, instead of relying on logistics, they're going to get their own trucks, they're going to hire their own truckers. Um, is that going to be something that is a viable strategy in the near to long term, or you know is there going to be so much pressure on these drivers that that's just going to make everything worse?
Yeah, so the difficulty with that, I feel like you're always going to shoot yourself in the foot logistically, and when it comes to top down business decision making, because logistics is one of the first thing that they'll cut the budget to, because it's one of the only things that they don't really, that they can, because somebody else will pick up the slack and they'll lose money to get that better account and get to better days, right? And if they make profit on 70% of the months and only lose 30% of the months, then it's a win-win for them. The problem
Mm,
is how big is that loss right now that they're taking in order to get that win later that may not be as juicy as it once was.
gotcha. Yeah.
So again, you have to. That's why it's important to have several, go-to brokers like myself, because we're running lanes, flatbed and dry van and box truck, all across, the country. And I'm doing overseas and hazmat shipments as well that our company provides teams that handles all those operations. So we can do whatever it is that is necessary, and we can develop a long-term relationship. And I think right now is everybody is scrambling and they're getting now's a great opportunity to get in with some new clients and show that, hey, things used to be easy. Now things are hard. Who's going to
Hmm.
stick around and fight? Who's going to have your back? And because I got to tell you, if a broker is only making $100 or $200 on a load that costs them 35 or 4,000 to book, is that really enough to write home about to make you want to wake up and be the first person at the office to handle those fires that you have to put out, to take those calls at 9, 11, 12, 8, 1 a.m., dealing with over the road issues. And there's a small percentage of brokers out there that are elite that will always answer their call for their customers. I happen to be one of them, and I
Hmm.
believe and I care for my customers' products, and I understand that right now is very, very tough. So I'm also taking less just so that they can survive, and then they can plan for the next quarter on, okay, we need to incorporate these anticipated rise in freight costs into our pricing. And that's what everybody that is in the recycling industry needs to do right now. I mean, I know there's a lot of great things happening in the markets as far as precious metals is concerned, gold,
Hmm.
silver. They're doing phenomenal jobs. So
Memories
maybe
through the roof right now. There's a lot of this
uh,
material is high
right.
value, and they'll pay whatever it takes to move it right now.
Well,
But
you would think that, but there's been a lot of hold off on loads and purchasing because of freight costs. If you're a salesperson and part of your commission comes out of how much it costs to move the product, you're going to be a little bit more conscious on what you're buying, right?
yeah,
You're going to be more selective on those A grade boards than getting C grade boards, right? So it has you have to have a top down mentality, but you have to understand the bottom up pillar that's the foundation of your entire purpose. You're just on the other end of the telephone. You're not really actually seeing the board, and you're getting it from point A to point B. Maybe it's going overseas. Maybe it's getting um, uh, recycled here locally in the states. It doesn't matter what you're doing if your job is really just to be a piece of the pie that you're just getting the commission of. Then you have to take this into consideration.
yeah,
So that's really just the big moral of the story today is the freight prices are kind of here to stay for now until we can get a larger number of local more carriers that are local to the United States that are investing in not cutting corners,
yeah.
basically. Imagine
And
all the
it's going to be hard
recyclers that,
because the
yeah, go ahead.
workforce is only so big, and new workers aren't going to be coming in. I mean, that's we blocked, kind of the non-English language speakers from kind of taking potential positions. Um, this is going to be something that's structural for a while. I think I'm with you, Spencer. I don't think this is going to end in a couple, even for a couple of years, because I don't see that the spigot of new immigration being turned back on anytime soon, no matter, what party gets back into power. That's not something that, the American people seem to have an appetite for right now is to reopen the borders. Um, and, those laws aren't going to be, changed back. And, we're just going to have to make do with, what we have and make our situation better. But that's going to take time and money.
But
So I guess,
how would you do that in your opinion? What would that take for, your to communicate that to your audience and to your customers? It takes communication, and it
yes,
takes
absolutely.
and it takes actually understanding the ancillary factors and the contributing factors and the social and economic factors and policy decisions that are really affecting it. If COVID never happened, we would have never had that jump in rate hikes, because people would have been able to go and buy their goods like they normally do, but they were
Hmm.
instructed and advised not to do so. So that, that means we still had to go and get our stuff, or it had to be brought to us. And
Yep.
if I can't go get it, that means I have to go pay somebody else to go get it. And that's when you started to see inflation really kind of take flight. And then you saw the cannibalization of carriers, and then all of the requirements. So basically, you had all the people that were doing good work, the people doing bad work that cut into their salary and their livelihood, pushed them out. Now all those people that did it the wrong way are kind of left with the bag in their hand, and they're about to head out because they don't want to get in trouble, basically. So
Hmm.
we need that 200,000 American workforce that got out of the trucking market due to those prices going too low for them to stay in business and buy parts and have them shipped in from overseas. Tariffs have had a problem with that. May now get an opportunity to be able to solidify themselves as trustworthy carriers that you can depend on and rely on, and they're not going to take the rates to the extreme that these random carriers, or carriers that that you've worked with before, they just understand the way the market is. Some people are going to try to hose you, and the other people's are going to be willing to work with you. So it comes back to communication and relationships with your carriers.
All right. Totally agree. Someone gave you two things. Let us know where, are there any upcoming shows that people might be able to get a chance to see you and to have a conversation with you face to face? And then a final word.
I definitely will be at the next E-Waste convention, the one in New Orleans later this fall. I do a few conventions for different industries every year, but I will always at least do one e-waste industry convention every year. I think it's very important just to stay connected with the entire industry as a whole. And there's
Hmm.
not very many logistics brokerages and brokers that invest their time into that industry. So it's cool to be a partner of that. And I guess I would say final word. If you did have questions, if you have been experiencing the pain points of these rate hikes, if brokers are saying they can book it, but they're coming back a day or 2 days later saying, hey, this price isn't holding water, feel free to reach out to Steve, and Steve can put you in contact with me directly. I'd be happy to help. I know how tough times are right now, and to be able to build a relationship with a broker that keeps you at the forefront and wakes up early every morning to make sure that you can spend more time with your families, I could be that guy for you.
All right. Well, Spencer, yeah, pleasure to meet you last year at eScrap. I'll look forward to seeing you again there this year. I'm actually going to be heading to San Diego at the end of the week where I've got a planning session for this year's eScrap. I'm part of the planning committee, so I'm going to be giving an update to everybody as to what I've learned from that next week. But
Awesome.
until next month, until we meet again, you take care of yourself, Spencer, and
Thank
everybody
you,
else.
Steve. I appreciate your time, and thank you to your listeners.
All right. Take care, everybody. See you next month. Bye now.